From the moment I was born, I knew our clan had produced a concubine who reigned supreme in the Imperial harem. It was said the emperor adored her beyond measure, and after her passing, every favored consort bore some resemblance to her in their eyes and brows. As I grew older, my clansmen made a startling discovery. Not only did my features mirror hers, but even my temperament was identical to hers. They all say the Song family is about to produce another imperial consort. The night before I was sent to the capital, Mother held me and wept bitterly. They say the palace is a place that devours people without spitting out bones. Your aunt's favor was merely superficial glory, otherwise she wouldn't have perished so young. Why must you leap into such an abyss? Of course I knew, because in my past life, I died a miserable death in the depths of the palace. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. From the moment I was born, I never cried or fussed, because I was born with memories of my previous life. Strangely enough, I was reborn into the same family both times. In my past life, I was the legitimate daughter of the Earl of Ningyuan's household, but in this life, I was born into a family of minor officials, merely a collateral branch of the Earl's family. From the moment I was born, I knew that our clan had produced a noble consort who was the emperor's favorite in the imperial harem. The descendants of the Earl of Ningyuan's household were mediocre, and this noble consort was the only one who brought glory, benefiting the entire family. However, though the noble consort was favored, she had already passed away before I was born. It is said the emperor adored his imperial consort so deeply that after her passing, every favored concubine by his side bore some resemblance to her in their eyes and brows. The matriarch of the earl's household could no longer restrain herself. Under the pretext of the old madam's birthday banquet, she began searching among the clan for women who resembled the late imperial consort in appearance. At 5 years old, I was led by my mother through the gates of Ningyuan Earl's mansion. With no one to guide us, my mother lost her way in the vast estate. Beads of sweat formed on her temples as she fretted. Your father couldn't come due to official duties, and now I'm late to pay respects to the old madam for her birthday. This will surely bring blame upon your father too. I raised my little hand to point at a narrow path, saying in my childish voice, Mother, there's another way over there. Taking that shortcut, Mother reached the main hall in no time. She patted my head. Our Maya is so clever, finding the right path in no time. Not that I'm particularly smart, it's just that I grew up here in my past life, so of course I remember the way. I recognized my birth mother from my previous life at first glance. She remains the matriarch of the Ningyuan Earl's household, appearing as dignified and elegant as ever. Though her most beloved daughter is gone, not a single strand of white has appeared in her hair. Her radiance remains undiminished. Surveying the young women of the clan with a slight frown, she remarked, They're all just common powder and paint, far inferior to Muyao. Mother led me forward to pay respects, yet she failed to recognize me. Aunt Zhao standing nearby looked astonished. This little girl looks exactly like the young mistress did when she was a child. My birth mother from my previous life merely glanced at me before indifferently looking away. Not surprising, her eyes only ever saw my worthless younger brother. I was raised by the wet nurse in the household. What I looked like as a child, she naturally neither remembers nor cares about. All she cares about is whether this noble house can produce another imperial consort to pave the way for her son's future. In my past life, I had little familial affection, but in this lifetime, I finally have a mother who truly loves me. I tugged at Mother's sleeve and whispered, Mother, let's go. After delivering the birthday gifts, Mother and I were seated in the side hall. The side hall was filled with unfamiliar faces I'd never seen in my past life. Even the servants serving tea were few. I quietly ate the pastries Mother handed me while listening to the women in the side hall chattering away. Did you see earlier, the Ningyuan Earl's household made such a grand display. Even His Majesty sent birthday gifts for the old madam. His Majesty cherishes past affections. Even if Consort Ru is no longer with us, he will treat her family generously. Such fortune is something our humble family couldn't attain in several lifetimes. I sneered inwardly. Shenyi's so-called favor was nothing but arsenic coated in sugar. In my previous life when I was still alive, my reputation was far from good. Everyone in the capital knew that the emperor and empress shared a harmonious and deeply affectionate relationship, while I was merely the wicked concubine who stood between them. Though I was born with striking beauty, I wasn't particularly favored when I first entered the palace. That was until Shenyi discovered that the more he doted on me, the more jealous the empress became. When the queen was angry with him, he would always summon me, but within a few days, the queen would relent. In Shenyi's eyes, I wasn't even a substitute, just a pretty plaything to provoke the queen's jealousy. Yet back then, I served him with utter devotion. Over time, even a plaything could stir genuine affection in his heart. During a hunting ground assassination attempt, without a second thought, I stepped in front of Shunyi to shield him. The arrow pierced through my chest, and Shunyi carried my blood-soaked body back to the palace. As my consciousness wavered, Shunyi grasped my hand and said with a trembling voice, "Ayao, once you recover from your injuries, let's start over." In the past, he would only call me Rua in moments of affection. This was the first time he'd ever addressed me as Ayao. Yet, I didn't grasp the meaning behind his words. After I recovered from my injuries, Shunyi issued an edict promoting me to Consort Ru, and the Imperial kitchen staff was completely replaced. Though I had been in the palace for 2 years without conceiving, shortly after being granted the consort title, the Imperial physician diagnosed me with pregnancy. I waited with joyful anticipation for the child in my womb to be born, thinking that in this deep palace, I would finally have someone to rely on. But in the end, premature birth and hemorrhaging took place, and the child did not survive. After the miscarriage, I would dream every night of the child's blue and purple corpse. Waking up in tears from the nightmare, after losing my child, my mind gradually became unhinged. Everyone thought I would incur Shunyi's disgust, but instead, he grew even more tender toward me. I cried and screamed like a madwoman, clawing bloody streaks across Shunyi's face. Yet he only held me tighter in his arms, his eyes filled with guilt as he soothed me. "Ah Yao, childbirth is too painful, let's never have another child again." I was childless, yet exceptionally honored as the Imperial Consort, who reigned supreme in the harem, yet alternated between lucidity and madness. My episodes of madness were kept secret. Shunyi often came to visit me, his face frequently bearing fresh scratches. He merely told his ministers that he had adopted a mischievous kitten. Even in my lucid moments, I could sense the depth of his affection for me, yet his profound affection became my death warrant. The Empress accompanied Shunyi all the way to the supreme throne, only for his eyes to gradually lose sight of her. Even when I was already losing my mind, Shunyi still doted on me so much. No matter how much she pretended to be virtuous, she couldn't tolerate me anymore. In the days that followed, my moments of clarity became fewer and fewer. During one rare moment of lucidity, I stared at the butterfly outside the windowsill and murmured, "Flowers, flowers." The maid smiled at me and said, "Does the noble consort wish to see the flowers? This servant will take you to the courtyard." I rarely went out, but that day I chased a butterfly and ran out of my chamber. I wasn't completely mad yet when I encountered the Empress admiring flowers with the second prince in the Imperial garden. I still remembered to pay my respects. The Empress smiled gently at me, but her words were laced with venom. "Ah, the noble consort has finally come to her senses. There are things I won't tell you now, things you might never know in this lifetime. Little sister, did you not realize? The Emperor's favor toward you was merely to make me jealous. Knowing how I detest you, he dosed your daily meals with cooling medicine to reassure me. Your body was long rendered unfit for childbearing, that's why. Despite all those tonics you drank, you still gave birth to a stillborn. Surely you didn't truly believe His Majesty cherished you. Even your title, Noble Consort Ru, was taken from my childhood nickname. You, the gentle noble consort, are nothing but a joke." Seeing me in this state now, the Empress must be gloating, yet her eyes were filled with nothing but hatred as she looked at me. The matron beside her pressed down on my hand, plucked a golden hairpin from my head, and placed it in hers. Holding the hairpin, she slashed it fiercely across her own son's arm. The child's cries jolted me completely awake. They finally released me. The guard slowly drew his blade, its cold gleam like a razor's edge reflecting my ghastly pale profile. Collapsed on the ground, I raised my eyes to ask her, "Your Majesty, the Empress must have plotted for quite some time to eliminate me, haven't you?" She slowly leaned down and smiled at me, saying, "This palace initially had no intention of taking your life. I merely added some mind-altering drugs to the balm you use daily. Yet even so, you remain far too conspicuous." I stared at the blood-stained golden hairpin before me, my voice trembling as I asked, "I won't live past today, will I?" The Empress straightened up, looking down at me with a sinister smile. "For a lowly wretch like you to have lived until today is already a stroke of good fortune." Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly let out a piercing scream. I picked up the golden hairpin from the ground and stabbed fiercely at her. Chaos erupted all around, with incessant clamor filling the air. The blade pierced through my chest, and I collapsed to the ground. A bloody mist filled my vision as I saw Shunyi running toward me in panic. The Empress covered her face, blood continuously seeping through her fingers. The matron beside her quickly reacted. Kneeling before Shen Yi while clutching the 2-year-old second prince, "Your Majesty," the imperial concubine suddenly went mad and attempted to assassinate the empress and the prince. Shen Yi didn't glance at them. Kneeling on the ground as he held me, he sent someone to fetch the imperial physician. His voice nearly torn apart, his embrace hurt my entire body. My body temperature kept dropping along with the blood gushing from my chest. Fortunately, the pain soon faded. I died, yet I did not. I was reborn, becoming human once more. This life blessed me with loving parents, free from the burdens of my past existence as a noble daughter shouldering family expectations. Now, I could grow up unconstrained. Had I not retained memories from my past life, I would have likely fulfilled my mother's wishes, marrying a virtuous husband, raising children, and living an ordinary life. Yet I simply cannot forget the hatred from my previous existence, the me from that life. Along with my child who never got to live, our bodies have long since decayed in the grave, but those who killed us still live comfortably in the palace. The older I grew, the clearer that memory became, and my features blossomed into striking beauty. Mother began to worry and discussed my marriage with father. "Once Maya comes of age, we should arrange her marriage. You've always doted on our daughter the most, how can you bear to let her marry? Maya is far too beautiful. If the people of the Ningyuan Earl's household were to see her, I also hope she marries into a good family soon." Father sighed. "To be honest, the prefect has approached me several times in private, saying his son has taken a liking to our Maya and wants to take her in as a concubine." The prefect's son, isn't he just a scoundrel, to think of making Maya his concubine? Absolutely not. Don't worry, madam, the prefect has brought it up several times. And I've refused every time. I carried the soup into the room when my parents' conversation suddenly fell silent. I asked softly, "Father is just a minor official. What does the prefect want with him?" Father took a bite of his steamed bun and said casually, "Nothing important. All these years, father had been nothing but a dutiful petty official, naturally unaware of the dirty tricks in the bureaucratic world. He thought that by refusing the magistrate's favors, I could escape unscathed. In their eyes, we're nothing but ants beneath their feet." The next day, as soon as I stepped out of the embroidery shop, Guosheng blocked my path. "You don't actually believe your father's protection can keep you from my grasp, do you?" There was no panic on my face as I stood there quietly watching him. "Young Master Guo, why be in such a hurry? With my humble background, could I possibly refuse you?" Guosheng laughed upon hearing this. "You're more sensible than your father. I had him thrown into prison and beaten twice, yet he still wouldn't agree to let me marry you." Clenching my fingers tightly, I fixed my gaze on him. "I'm willing to marry you. Can you release my father?" "Of course, once you come of age, I'll send someone to propose." He narrowed his eyes, his gaze slithering over me like a viscous film. "Disgusting. Don't worry, I'll treat you well after you marry into my family." He raised his hand to touch my face, but I deftly avoided it without seeming obvious. I smiled at him. I still had choices, but you've forced me onto this path. He didn't understand the meaning behind my words. However, Guosheng, seeing that I was sensible, agreed not to disturb me until my coming-of-age ceremony. My father was released by him, and our family enjoyed a rare period of peaceful days. Mother's family lived in a small border village, and father began planning to take mother and me there to start a new life. But Guosheng's men watched our house every day, leaving us no chance to escape. Father was at his wit's end when he received a letter from the Ningyuan Earl's residence. A month ago, I went to Wen Temple to pray for blessings and met Granny Zhao, who was out visiting relatives. When she saw me, she was so startled that she twisted her ankle. I helped her to the pavilion, where she trembled as she touched my warm hand, looking at me in disbelief. Miss, how have you come back to life? You must have mistaken me for someone else." "Nanny," I glanced at the token at her waist and said, "So you're from the Ningyuan Earl's household? Come to think of it, our family is somewhat related to the Earl's residence." Nanny Zhao snapped out of her daze, asked for my name, and then hurried back to the capital. By the time father received the letter, the Ningyuan Earl's carriage had already left the capital. "They've set their sights on Maya after all." Mother tossed the letter into the stove fire, steadied herself, and said to father, "Perhaps we should flee tonight." Mother gave father her gold bracelet, but when he went to pawn it, he was spotted by Guosheng's men. Guosheng kidnapped me to his residence, threatening that if I dared consider escape again, he'd kill my parents, though my family holds no power or influence. "We are still considered a collateral branch of the Ningyuan Earl's household," I whispered in warning. The Earl's people are already on their way to escort me to the capital for the Imperial selection. Your father may be a prefect, but I doubt he can afford to offend the Earl's family. With the support of the Ningyuan Earl's residents, you certainly speak with confidence. He stared at me, grinning sinisterly. But if you're no longer a virgin and can't participate in the selection, will the Earl's residents still back you? As he spoke, he rushed over and pinned me down on the table. Outside the door, Magistrate Guo's furious shouts could be heard. Guo Sheng, you mustn't touch her. She's the Earl's residence's candidate for the Imperial selection. You unfilial son, if you lay a hand on her, our family will be ruined. Don't you dare be stupid, you brat. Magistrate Guo pounded on the door with thunderous bangs. Guo Sheng acted as if he hadn't heard. Still tearing at my clothes, he undid his belt, his foul breath exhaling against the side of my face. Soon, you'll be mine. Men, truly creatures who think with their lower halves. As he lost himself in the moment, I reached for the dagger hidden at my waist and drove it hard into his neck. The foul-smelling blood splattered across my face, gritting my teeth against the nausea. I stabbed several more times until I watched him breathe his last. Magistrate Guo pushed open the door and fainted on the spot at the sight of his son lying in a pool of blood. After washing the bloodstains from my body, I resumed my usual gentle demeanor when meeting the people from the Ningyuan Earl's household. I said I was willing to go to the capital for the Imperial selection. However, since the son of Prefect Guo died because of me, they had to ensure my parents were properly settled. Father and mother received a large sum of silver and were arranged to leave the next day. On the night before our parting, mother held me in her arms, weeping uncontrollably. They all say the palace is a place that devours people without spitting out their bones. Your aunt's favor was merely superficial glory. Otherwise she wouldn't have perished so young. Why must you throw yourself into such an abyss? Of course, I knew all this that mother said, because in my past life, I was Song Muyao, who died tragically in the depths of the palace. I patted mother's back and comforted her in a low voice. If my daughter doesn't enter the palace, our whole family won't survive. I'd rather die than bring misfortune upon you. Father and mother, hearing this, father silently wiped his tears in the corner. In my past life, my family treated me with cold indifference. Never did I expect that in this life I would be so dearly loved by my parents. It makes this lifetime worth living. I boarded the carriage bound for the capital. While father and mother set sail from Huainan, I heard that the noble lady of the Earl's household was quite delighted when she saw my portrait. Nanny Zhao told her that even my temperament was as gentle as Song Muyao's. If they were looking for a substitute for Song Muyao, there was probably no better choice in this world than me. Before I even reached the capital, rumors began circulating that the Ningyuan Earl's household would produce another imperial consort. However, these rumors were suppressed before they could spread widely. Soon, news came from the palace. Due to severe drought in the north leaving hundreds of miles barren, His Majesty issued an edict cancelling this year's imperial selection of concubines to raise funds for disaster relief. The northern regions have suffered from drought for over 2 months. Yet the imperial selection of concubines was cancelled at this very time. One need not guess whose doing this was. The capital buzzes with praise for the Empress leading by example in palace frugality, a model of virtue. Who would have thought that after 16 years, she still fears me so? However, I had long anticipated that she wouldn't easily let me enter the palace. After arriving in the capital, the Ningyuan Earl's residents began scheming to thrust me before Shen Yi's eyes. They hired musicians to teach me music and dance. It seems the path I walked in my past life, I must tread once again in this one. But they didn't know how much the queen feared this face of mine identical to Song Muyao's. Their actions would only hasten my demise. Fortunately, entering the palace as a candidate concubine wasn't my only option. I went to the drunken fragrance pavilion wearing a veil. The assassin arranged by the queen followed me all the way into the tavern. He poisoned my tea but waited in vain for the toxins to take effect. Growing impatient, the killer disguised himself as a waiter and brought in a plate of pastries. The moment he drew his dagger, I flung the perfumed powder I'd been clutching toward him and fled toward the corridor. In the midst of panic, I stumbled and knocked over a standing screen in the corner. I knelt on the ground, lifting my head with both hands supporting me. Before I could regain my composure, a flash of silver suddenly pressed against my throat, the cold blade touching my skin. The veil was lifted by the swordsman's blade. I looked up at the nobleman before me, tears brimming in my eyes, and said, "Someone is trying to kill me. Young master, save me." He lowered his gaze to look at me, a flash of admiration passing through his eyes, and said to his guards, "Do not harm her." The weight at my neck lifted as the cold blade withdrew. leaving behind a faint trail of blood. The richly dressed nobleman took 2 steps forward, his guard whispering a warning, "Your Highness, be careful, she might be an assassin." He paid no heed, stepping closer to help me up, his gaze settling on the jade pendant at my waist. "Do you still remember me, when I got lost in Chongwa Temple as a child? It was you who saved me." I froze for a moment, my expression one of astonishment. He just called you, Your Highness." Shen Huayan revealed his identity to me, telling me he was the current crown prince. How could I not know who he was? The memorial tablet of the Empress's birth mother is enshrined at Chongwa Temple, and she visits annually to pay her respects. 8 years ago, Shen Huayan got lost in the temple, and I recognized his identity just by the fabric of his clothes and the scar on his arm. I lured him into a hunter's trap with a rabbit, then rescued him at his most vulnerable moment. After saving him, I casually mentioned how beautiful the jade inlaid on his hat was. He gave me that jade with the auspicious cloud pattern. Shen Huayan asked me in a low voice, "I remember your name is Yunmai." I lowered my eyes, avoiding his intense gaze. "Your Highness still remembers." His eyes remained fixed on me. "I once sent people to look for you." Tears welled up in my eyes as I gazed at him. "Had I not met Your Highness today, I fear I would have." Shen Huayan grasped my hand, his eyes darkening. "With me here, no one in the capital dares touch you." I shyly lowered my lashes, my smile not reaching my eyes. Years ago, I had schemed to save him solely to secure my own survival in the days to come. I never expected him to remember me for so many years. What a romantic soul. Even saving me the trouble of love potions, Shen Huayan settled me in his private residence and assigned people to protect me. With his protection, the Empress could no longer act rashly against me. Shen Huayan asked me to follow him and move into the Eastern Palace. I nodded and requested the status of a concubine. Shen Huayan's crown princess had long been betrothed to the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter. Feeling that the position of concubine was beneath me, he filled my courtyard with rare treasures from his palace. Among them was a hairpin adorned with Eastern pearls, which I adored. I wore it to the Prime Minister's mid-autumn banquet. The Ningyuan Count's estate went to great lengths to arrange this, hoping I'd have a chance to appear before Shen Yi. Yet Shen Yi never showed up, and I was seated at the most inconspicuous corner of the banquet. As dusk deepened, the noble ladies around suddenly noticed the luminous glow emanating from the pearl on my hairpin. It turned out to be a night luminous pearl. To embed such a large luminous pearl in a hairpin is the height of extravagance. How could a lone girl from the countryside like me be worthy of such a treasure? After that night, rumors spread like wildfire. They all said I had no shame, that I had climbed into the bed of some powerful noble in the capital. In an instant, my reputation was utterly ruined. To prevent me from marrying into the Eastern Palace, the Empress went so far as to threaten suicide, forcing Shen Huayan to sever all ties with me. I dug my nails into my palms, gazing at Shen Huayan through tear-blurred eyes. "Now that my reputation is in ruins, if you abandon me too, I truly have no path left to survive, but I cannot disregard Her Majesty's feelings." Shen Huayan's face showed reluctance as he spoke hoarsely. "Yunmai, I will arrange everything for you to ensure your remaining years are carefree." I wiped the tears that overflowed from my eyes and placed my hands together before my brow, bowing respectfully to him. "Yunmai will certainly not cause Your Highness any difficulties." Hearing these words, Shen Huayan turned and left. He hadn't gone more than a few steps when he heard a scream behind him. He heard the maidservant shriek, Miss has taken her own life." Shen Huayan staggered into my chamber. He snatched the sword from the guard's hand. A flash of steel crossed my vision, and the taut white silk snapped with a sharp sound. I fell into Shen Huayan's embrace. His eyes reddened as he looked at me. "How could you do something so foolish?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "Only by dying could I avoid bringing trouble upon Your Highness." He held me tightly, and I could feel him trembling. He was afraid. After a long while, he finally released me, staring at the red marks on my neck as he spoke to me. "Yunmai, I will take you to see my father and beg him to allow you to become my crown princess, to plead with Shen Yi to give me a proper title." This is getting more and more interesting. "Your Majesty, will His Majesty agree? You're the woman I truly love. Father will grant me this request." As night fell, Shen Huayan brought me into the palace. I changed into a lavender pink dress and applied heavier makeup. Shen Huayan helped me down from the carriage, his eyes darkening. "Why are you dressed so dazzlingly?" I thought since we're going to see His Majesty, I shouldn't appear too plain. I lifted my gaze and asked softly, "Does Your Highness not like it?" He smiled. "I like you no matter how you look." Shen Huayan led me down the palace path. A passing palace maid stole a glance at us and turned deathly pale with fright. A constant murmur of trembling whispers reached my ears. Consort Ru, it's Consort Ru. With my veil still covering my face, I turned slightly to ask Shen Huayan, didn't Consort Ru already die? Why can her name still be heard in the palace? Shen Huayan's lips curled into a mocking smile. That madwoman nearly killed me and the Empress Dowager, yet His Majesty still remembers her. He even summoned priests to call back her spirit. That's why people say this palace is haunted. As he spoke, he wrapped an arm around my shoulder. Are you scared? I shook my head. In my past life, when I died, Shen Huayan was only 2 years old. It seems he truly remembers nothing. Shen Huayan brought me into the Imperial study. Shen Yi was reviewing memorials. Now nearing 40, he hadn't aged much. Showing little change compared to 16 years ago, Shen Huayan led me to kneel in greeting. Yet Shen Yi didn't even lift his eyelids. What brings you here so late? Shen Huayan spoke respectfully. Your son has found a beloved woman and wished to present her to His Majesty, begging for your blessing. Shen Yi rubbed his temples. It's just taking a concubine. You can decide for yourself. Father, your son does not wish to marry the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter. Your son only wants to marry Song Yunmian as his wife. Shen Yi threw down the memorial in his hand, his expression suddenly darkening. Outrageous. Shen Huayan quickly knelt down in prostration. Father, forgive my offense. I quickly followed suit, dropping to my knees in prostration. The surroundings fell deathly silent in an instant, time seeming to freeze where even a dropped needle could be heard. After what felt like an eternity, I finally heard Shen Yi's voice speaking above my head. Raise your head and let me see you. His voice was deep and cold, yet I could still detect a slight tremble in it. With my eyes lowered, I slowly lifted my head. The old eunuch beside Shen Yi sharply rebuked. How dare you? Before His Majesty, you must not cover your face. The moment I removed the veil from my face, I heard the old eunuch gasp sharply and Shen Yi's heavy breathing. He walked step by step until he stood before me. With my head bowed, the light before me suddenly dimmed. At this moment, Shen Huayan also noticed something amiss in Shen Yi's gaze toward me. He asked in confusion, Father, what's wrong with you? The next moment, Shen Yi's hand clamped tightly around my neck. Speak. Who sent you? What have you done to your face? Why do you look exactly like her? His eyes were wide with fury as he glared at me, as if he truly wanted to kill me. My back pressed against the pillar, my hands struggled to rest on the back of his. I looked at him in panic, the corners of my eyes flushed red. Shen Yi's grip gradually loosened. Shen Huayan was stunned by the scene before him. Father, Yunmai is not an assassin, she truly isn't. Shen Yi finally released me. Gazing down at where I sat collapsed on the ground, he spoke coldly to Shen Huayan. You cannot marry her, nor can you take her away. But, get out. Shen Yi's temple vein bulged. His fury barely contained. Shen Huayan had probably never seen him this enraged before. Scrambling away in a panic, I was taken by palace attendants to a side hall. Several matrons entered to bathe and dress me, meticulously examining every inch of my body to confirm my appearance wasn't achieved through disguise. By now, they must have quickly uncovered my connection to the Ningyuan Earl's household. Song Muyao and I are blood relatives after all. So sharing the same face isn't particularly strange. If there's one stain on my record, it would be killing Guisheng. However, by the time I arrived in the capital, the Ningyuan Earl's household had already poisoned Magistrate Guo, erasing this sole blemish of mine. It wasn't until late at night that Shen Yi finally appeared. He stood at the doorway, staring at me stiffly for a long time before slowly approaching. When I saw him, I shrank into the corner of the bed. No, don't kill me. His gaze softened as he lowered his voice. You resemble a Yao too much, it startled me just now. Your Majesty means, my aunt. I raised my eyes timidly and asked. They all say I look very much like my aunt. Could even Your Majesty not tell us apart? Shen Yi sat by the bedside looking at me and asked with a light laugh. Did the Ningyuan Earl's family bring you to the capital for the Imperial selection? I nodded. The mirth in his eyes abruptly froze. I cancelled the Imperial Consort selection. So you turned to the Crown Prince instead, though it was he who had cancelled the selection. His words made it sound as if the fault were mine. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. Someone wants me dead. Staying by the Crown Prince's side is the only way I can survive. Shen Yi's eyes flashed with a chilling murderous intent. Who wants to kill you? I don't know. My entire body trembled uncontrollably, like a frightened kitten, as I said in a shaky voice. I only remember the killer had a burn scar on the back of his hand. Shen Yi pulled me into his embrace. Don't worry, I will protect you. With me here, no one can harm you in the slightest. With red-rimmed eyes, I looked up at him. The people from the Count's mansion said that entering the palace would bring me favor like my aunt, but I don't want favor, I just want to live peacefully. The bruises left by his grip on my neck had already been treated with medicine by the attending maids. He gazed at the faint red marks, seemingly a bit distressed. Does it still hurt? I steadied myself and answered softly, It doesn't hurt anymore, Your Majesty. Could you please not kill me? Do you see me as a bloodthirsty tyrant in your eyes? He chuckled softly, his voice gentling. Stay by my side. And not only will you live well, but I can give you anything you desire. I shook my head. I don't want anything. Shen Yi's dark eyes gradually filled with desire. The last remnants of his reason seeming to crumble in an instant, he was already moved with passion, lowering his head to kiss me. Most of the candles in the hall had gone out, leaving only dim, flickering light. By the time I came to my senses, Shen Yi had already pinned me down on the bed. A warm teardrop fell onto my collarbone. I heard Shen Yi's voice grow hoarse. Ah Yao, I never thought you'd come back, that you'd ever come back. I spoke the same words as in my past life. Even my tone and expression were identical. How could he not mistake me for Song Muyao? In my past life, I became Shen Yi's favored consort when my heart first stirred with love. Back then, I wanted nothing else, only hoping to occupy a place in his heart. In this lifetime too, I want nothing at all. I only want your life. After one night of favor, I was infeft as the virtuous consort. The news caused an uproar throughout the Imperial harem. After all, it was unprecedented for someone like me, without any noble background, to be directly infeft as a consort upon entering the palace. I had just entered the palace when I became the sole favorite, staying in Shen Yi's side hall for 3 days before moving to the main bedchamber. At dawn, I went to the cunning palace to pay my respects. Amidst the curling incense smoke, the Empress sat regally upon her phoenix throne. The moment she saw me, her nails dug into the gilded armrests. I bowed respectfully to her, raising my eyes to observe her discreetly. She was different from before, the once aloof and virtuous Empress, who always claimed she would never rely on beauty to please others, now wore thick layers of powder, her makeup far more gaudy than before. As I noticed the cracked, porcelain-like makeup on her right cheek, I suppressed a cold smile in my eyes. It turned out that my final stab before death had disfigured her face. Her eyes bled with rage. Yet she had to maintain the virtuous demeanor befitting the Empress. You truly share your aunt's breathtaking beauty, no wonder His Majesty favors you. The surrounding concubines covered their lips in mocking laughter. She's just a stand-in for the consort Ru. What's there to be proud of? I heard she comes from some remote countryside. Her background isn't even as good as the illegitimate daughters of common families in the capital. But who told her to be born with such a pretty face? The Empress arched her slender eyebrows as she looked at me. These words were undoubtedly spoken to me through others at her behest. She wanted me to understand that in Shen Yi's eyes, I was merely a substitute. How ridiculous. Yet who among those present wasn't a substitute themselves? Some could dance the same steps. Some could play the same tunes, while others bore resemblance in appearance or temperament. Among all the concubines in the Imperial harem, I should be the least bothered about being treated as a substitute. I lowered my eyes with a faint smile. Indeed, this humble concubine entered the palace thanks to this face resembling her ladyship's. To receive His Majesty's favor is truly good fortune. The Empress's expression turned extremely unpleasant, yet at this moment, a brainless concubine chose to speak up. I've heard that Lady Shu wasn't exactly virtuous before entering the palace, having climbed a high branch. Only after speaking did she notice the Empress sitting on the high seat had turned deathly pale, her thick makeup appearing like a layer of dust. The high branch I climbed before entering the palace was none other than the Empress's own son, the current crown prince. To be honest, I was essentially taken by Shen Yi from his own son. I heard Shen Huayan fell ill after that night and hasn't paid his respects to Shen Yi these past few days. At this rate, I wonder if the crown prince position the Empress schemed so hard to secure for Shen Huayan can still be maintained. Sitting upright, I quietly gazed at the Empress. Didn't Lady Li speak nonsense? Is Her Majesty the Empress not going to punish her? The Empress narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at me. Consort Shu. What do you think would be a suitable punishment for her? I set down my teacup and replied gently. Drag her out and give her 30 lashes, make sure she can never speak again. Upon hearing this, noble Consort Li's legs gave way beneath her, nearly causing her to slump from her chair. The Empress let out a cold laugh. Who would have thought you could be so ruthless? I curled my lips in a smile that didn't reach my eyes. This concubine isn't as gentle-tempered as Auntie, indeed. I am somewhat more ruthless, however. The Empress wasn't as cruel as she merely ordered noble consort Li to be taken away and given 30 slaps to the face. When I left, Lady Li's fair face had already turned red and swollen. The once haughty person now had her hair in disarray, looking utterly disheveled. She still seemed defiant, glaring up at me with resentment. I walked up to her and delivered a fierce slap across her face. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, splattering onto the brick floor. I looked down at her from my superior position. Next time you dare look at me with such eyes, a mere slap will be the least of your worries. With those words, I cast a cold glance at the concubine not far away and turned to leave. Having just received the Emperor's favor, my reputation for arrogance had already spread throughout the harem, making me the target of every concubine's resentment. In that case, I might as well fully live up to my reputation for being vicious. After teaching Lady Li a lesson today, no one dared to provoke me anymore, and I finally gained some peace. Shen Yi was busy with government affairs, yet he constantly wanted to see me. At lunchtime, he summoned me to accompany him for the meal. Why are you angry with noble consort Li? If you dislike her, I'll simply send her away. Noble consort Li claimed I was improper before entering the palace, as your majesty's person. How could I tolerate her slander? That's why I punished her. I set down my chopsticks, looking at him with wounded eyes. I wonder how this matter sounded when it reached your majesty's ears. Shen Yi's gaze turned cold. I know your temperament, so I didn't believe those words the Empress said about you. I gave a faint smile. It seems Her Majesty the Empress has taken a dislike to me. Shen Yi let out a cold scoff, and a shadow guard emerged from the darkness. Repeat what you just said. The shadow guard bowed respectfully and replied, this subordinate has confirmed that the assassin who attempted to kill Consort Shu that day was a death warrior under the command of the Duke. Shen Yi waved his hand, and the shadow guard retreated. I looked at him with confusion. Why would the Duke? Shen Yi said. The Duke's residence is the maternal family of the Empress. I couldn't stop trembling all over. Is Her Majesty the Empress trying to kill me? You and your aunt look exactly alike, which would inevitably arouse the Empress's jealousy. Shen Yi's gaze was sharp as a blade, his lips curling into a mocking smile. It seems my Empress is far from as virtuous as she appears. I have always feared death, and now not a trace of color remained on my face. My entire body trembled uncontrollably. So, even before I entered the palace, the Empress wanted me dead. Shen Yi gripped my hand tightly. With me here, no one can touch you. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him. Will I die a miserable death in the palace? Shen Yi's hand trembled violently, likely recalling the miserable death I suffered in my past life. He pulled me tightly into his embrace. It won't. Such things will never happen again. Shen Yi seemed even more fearful than I of the schemes within the Imperial harem. This morning, after paying respects to the Empress, she bestowed many gifts upon me. Shen Yi accompanied me back to the palace chambers and had someone inspect each of the items bestowed by the Empress. Soon, they discovered poison in a box of tribute lip balm. The Imperial physician who tested the poison said, although the amount of poison in this lip balm is slight, if Consort Shu were to use it day after day, it wouldn't be long before she would die suddenly from a surge of blood qi. Terrified, I collapsed onto the couch, murmuring in shock, what have I done to offend her? Is it simply because I resemble my aunt? Shen Yi's gaze turned icy as he stared at the box of lip rouge in the Imperial physician's hand, his face growing paler by the second. I suddenly grabbed his arm and spoke in a hurried tone. Your Majesty, yesterday in the Imperial garden, I encountered a deranged cleaning matron. She rushed up to me, calling me young miss, and said that nothing in the palace should be touched, that contact would drive one mad. I thought she was speaking nonsense at the time, but now it seems there might have been some truth to her words. Upon hearing this, all color drained from Shen Yi's face, his sharp black eyes appearing to lose their focus. After a long while, he finally spoke in a hoarse voice. Go find the person Consort Shu mentioned. Soon, Xiaohong was brought into the bedchamber. In my past life, she grew up with me and entered the palace as my personal maid when I married into the Imperial family. Before my mind became unsound, anticipating that I would fall out of favor, I released her from the palace to marry, yet she feared no one could care for me properly after her departure. When my mind was clouded, she deceived me by claiming to be a newly assigned palace maid and stayed by my side. After my death, she was condemned to hard labor. At that time, the entire rear palace was under the Empress's dominion. The guards, knowing she had been my chief maid, subjected her to constant humiliation. Xiaohong is only 34 this year, yet her hair has already turned prematurely gray. Yesterday, I met her cleaning the drainage ditch in the Imperial garden. Only then did I realize this foolish girl had sacrificed the rest of her life to take care of me. Xiao Hong glanced up at me, her eyes already reddening. It wasn't until the eunuch reminded her that she remembered to kneel and pay her respects. Shen Yi narrowed his eyes as he examined her. I recall you used to serve by Consort Ru's side. How did you end up doing hard labor? This servant was Consort Ru's personal maid who accompanied her into the palace. Xiao Hong replied with downcast eyes. Perhaps someone in this palace harbors such deep hatred for the consort that even after her passing, they would go to any lengths to humiliate those who were close to her. Shen Yi pressed further. Why did you say those words to Consort Shu yesterday? Xiao Hong knelt on the ground, gazing at me with tears streaming uncontrollably from the corners of her eyes. All these years, this servant has been wondering every day after the miscarriage. Her Highness the noble consort was merely overwhelmed with grief. How could she suddenly suffer from nightly nightmares to the point of losing her mind? His Majesty dines with Her Highness every day, so surely no one would dare tamper with her meals. That leaves only the items she uses daily as the means to harm her. Yesterday, when this servant saw Her Highness the virtuous consort, I mistook her for the noble consort, fearing that the noble consort might be harmed again. That's why I spoke those words. She repeated word for word what I had taught her to say yesterday. Shen Yi turned to the eunuch beside him. The things from the noble consort's palace, the eunuch hastily replied. Her Majesty the Empress said that seeing them would make your Majesty dwell on memories, so she ordered the palace servants to discard them all. Only a few items your Majesty kept by your side remain. Shen Yi's gaze turned icy as he stared at the box of rouge on the desk, suddenly letting out a cold laugh. No doubt poison was also mixed into the items the noble consort used. Xiao Hong seemed to recall something and began kowtowing forcefully. I remember now, the maidservant said. After the noble consort's miscarriage, the scent of her daily face cream seemed different. I even asked the Imperial Household Department about it at the time. They said it was because they had added more rosewater to the cream, so I didn't think much of it. Shen Yi closed his eyes for a moment and said, investigate. The death of the gentle consort was a taboo subject for Shen Yi. And no one in the palace dared to mention it. With a box of lip balm I had tampered with myself, I successfully brought this old case to light. However, the Duke had once saved Shen Yi's life and was also the foremost contributor to his ascension to the throne. Out of gratitude for the Duke's kindness and to avoid being branded as heartless and ungrateful, Shen Yi preserved the Empress's title but confined her to the cunning palace. In my past life, my entire life was only worth the Empress's confinement, and Xiao Hong thought it was unfair for me. But this was precisely the outcome I desired. The Queen, because of that stab I gave before death, had her most cherished beauty ruined, making her despised by Shen Yi for 16 years. Now the position of queen she obtained by relying on her maternal family's power has become an empty shell. In the Imperial harem, people always fawn on those above and trample on those below. This noble queen must fall from her high position into the dust before she learns what true humiliation is. Death would be too easy an escape. What fun would that be? I must keep her alive so I can reclaim every bit of debt from my past life. Incense smoke curled from the burner as slanting sunlight filtered through the window lattice. I sat before the dressing table combing my hair when Xiao Hong entered carrying a tray of pastries. Had my past self still been alive, this would have been our quiet, lonely existence, Xiao Hong and I, clinging to each other for survival, having lived through 2 lifetimes. Xiao Hong has returned to serve by my side once more. However, now everyone calls her Matron Hong Yu, and the innocence in her eyes is no longer what it used to be. The Empress is crying injustice, claiming she wasn't the one who poisoned the rouge in the young Mrs. Lip Balm. What did His Majesty say? Your Majesty naturally didn't believe it, saying the young lady is too young to possess such profound cunning. Xiao Hong paused. Now the Empress has stopped clamoring to see His Majesty. I suppose she wants him to remember her at her most beautiful. I raised a brow slightly. So, her face is completely ruined then? Xiao Hong nodded. All these years His Majesty neglected her. She thought it was because of the scar on her face. That's why she kept making such a fuss with all these schemes. Now she won't need to fuss anymore. I flipped through the account books and asked without looking up, has anyone visited her recently? The Crown Prince sought His Majesty's favor and visited her yesterday. I heard he brought some healing ointment for the Empress. I smiled faintly. I almost forgot she still has the Crown Prince to pin her hopes on. The Empress still cares so much about her face, even under house arrest. She had the Duke's estate continuously send over priceless ointments and made the Crown Prince search far and wide for renowned physicians. By the time they remembered me, I had already begun assisting in managing the 6 palaces. relying on the accounting skills my father taught me. Shen Huayan came looking for me several times, but I refused to see him. His devotion to me remained unchanged. He even gave up his position as crown prince, writing in his letter that he would elope with me. To escape this deep palace, on a silent late night, I finally went to meet him. He had changed into a guard's uniform, his eyes sunken, his whole appearance much more haggard. "Your father Emperor's woman now, aren't you?" Shen Huayan looked at me and asked cautiously. "You knew perfectly well how much you resemble Consort Ru. Why did you still come with me to see Father Emperor in the palace?" Like Shen Yi, he had those same deep, affectionate eyes that could melt a dog's heart. With reddened eyes, I feigned innocence. I wore a veil when entering the palace, but I never imagined my face would bear such striking resemblance to my aunt. His dark eyes grew profound. "The Empress Mother says you framed her, that your closeness to me was all calculated, you merely sought revenge for your aunt." I smiled bitterly and said, "I was only 8 years old when I first met your highness. Do you really think I was scheming against you back then?" Shen Huayan's expression softened slightly at these words. I raised my eyes and gazed at him with a reproachful look. "It was all the Emperor's coercion. I don't want to be trapped in this deep palace for the rest of my life. Are you truly here to take me away, your highness?" he asked me hoarsely. "Yun Mian, did you ever truly love me?" I forced a smile. "To be with you, your highness, I would have given my life. As the crown prince, I bear too many burdens." Shen Huayan raised his hand to gently caress my cheek, his eyes filled with infatuation and reluctance. "Song Yun Mian, you were the first woman I ever loved, yet I have no choice but to let you go." His rough palm tenderly stroked my neck, before he could exert any force. The golden hairpin in my hand plunged deep into his chest. Shen Huayan's pupils contracted violently. I raised my head to meet his disbelieving gaze. "Just how stupid do you think I am? To believe in a man's sincerity once again?" Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. The Empress was right. My approach to you was all part of the scheme." I leaned in closer, whispering words only the two of us could hear. "Your highness still doesn't know, do you? I've long had spies planted in the Empress's palace." Of course I knew that Shen Huayan, to preserve his position as crown prince and enable the Empress to regain power, had tearfully vowed to kill me. The moment I pulled out the golden hairpin, Shen Huayan collapsed to the ground. I took 2 steps back, tore my dress to shreds, pinched red marks into my arms, and screamed, "Help, help me." The night patrol guards arrived quickly from nearby. When the torchlight illuminated Shen Huayan's face, everyone froze. The one who dared to disrespect the Emperor's favored consort at night was none other than the current crown prince. Shen Yi soon arrived at my bedchamber. I removed my hairpins and knelt on the ground to plead for forgiveness, the faint bruises visible beneath my plain white garments. Trembling all over, I shed bitter tears. I didn't know that person was the crown prince. I only wanted to protect my virtue, and accidentally injured his highness. Shen Yi looked slightly stunned. "Why were you out so late?" Xiao Hong came forward holding a jade vial. "Her ladyship was distressed by your majesty's persistent cough. Remembering a secret remedy from her hometown that requires water collected from bamboo leaves at night, she gathered for 2 nights to obtain this single vial. Who could have imagined she would encounter the crown prince tonight?" Shen Yi helped me up, his eyes filled with pity. "Someone is trying to harm you, it's not your fault." Hearing this, I threw myself into his arms, tears streaming uncontrollably from my eyes. "The crown prince said he would ruin my virtue. I was so afraid. Afraid that your majesty would abandon me." Shen Yi lowered his head and kissed my forehead. "How could that be?" At that moment, a eunuch stumbled in, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Your majesty, the crown prince, his highness the crown prince, has succumbed to his severe injuries, and passed away." Shen Yi's body stiffened, and it took him a long while before he could speak in a hoarse voice. "He deserved to die." I leaned against his chest, a cold smile curling at the corners of my lips. To preserve the Imperial Palace's reputation, Shen Yi publicly declared that the crown prince had accidentally drowned. Naturally, the Empress didn't believe this explanation. She quickly uncovered the true cause of the crown prince's death. Now they wished they could grind my bones to dust and scatter my ashes. The Empress had operated in the Imperial harem for many years. Even in her downfall, she still had many loyal followers. After dealing with several palace maids who attempted to assassinate me, I grew weary and went to Kuan Ning Palace to see the Empress. By then, the right side of her face had completely rotted away, and she could only conceal it with her disheveled long hair. The once pilously elegant Empress now appeared like a madwoman. Her bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at me. "It was you, you vile wretch, who killed Yanga. How dare you come here?" Adjusting the hairpin in my chignon, I smiled gently. "This morning I felt unwell and summoned the Imperial physician. He told me I'm with child." The Queen's eyes burned with hatred, as if they could drip blood. "You came here just to tell me that my son is gone, while you're carrying a child in your belly." The Imperial physician reported to His Majesty that I was 1 month pregnant, but in truth, the child in my womb is nearly 2 months old. I gently stroked my belly, lowering my eyes with a smile, after the Crown Prince's passing. His Majesty's cough worsened, and it took him a month to recover. She stared blankly at my abdomen, murmuring in a daze, "Is it Yanga? Is this Yanga's child?" I smiled faintly and said nothing. The Queen raised her eyes to meet my gaze. "Why are you telling me this?" I arched a delicate brow. "Your servant is famously afraid of death. Of course I hope Her Majesty the Queen will spare my life." The Queen's figure stiffened, the hidden porcelain shard in her hand cutting her palm. Blood trickling down her wrist. How ridiculous. Though she clearly wished to tear me limb from limb, she couldn't kill me. After all, the child in my womb was the only bloodline her son left in this world. In the days that followed, the Empress no longer fixated on taking my life. With her pent-up fury finding no outlet, she finally remembered who truly deserved her hatred. It was Xinyi who, disregarding years of marital affection, had confined her to the cunning palace as cold as the abandoned quarters, subjecting her to endless humiliation. It was Xinyi who, in his pursuit of another woman, abandoned her son and let him die under mysterious circumstances. It was Xinyi who had reduced her to such a state. Soon, she found her chance for revenge. The border war reached a critical point, and the court dispatched the capital's garrison troops to defend against the enemy. The only remaining force guarding the capital was the City Defense Battalion under the command of her younger brother, Xue Fang. As night fell, the rebel forces breached the palace gates and soon stormed into my bedchamber. Xue Fang sat atop his horse, pointing his sword at me as he ordered his subordinates, "Disfigure her face before taking her away. Be gentle, don't let the Imperial consort's pregnancy be disturbed." Standing my ground, I smiled faintly at him and said, "I deceived the Empress. The child in my womb isn't Shen Huayan's. In the future, the Empire will have no place for the Xue family." "What did you say?" Xue Fang froze for a moment before glaring at me viciously. "So what? All the princes in this palace are eldest sister's children. In that case, there's no need to keep you alive." His eyes bulged with rage as he raised his sword and swung it toward me. In an instant, a torrent of arrows rained down. Xue Fang died, pierced by countless arrows. I stared into his eyes that hadn't yet had time to close, and smiled. Today's events were nothing more than a trap set to catch the prey. The border garrison never actually requested reinforcements from the Imperial court. From the moment the Empress began plotting rebellion, Xinyi had already been laying his plans. I averted my gaze, fished out 2 pills from my waist, and swallowed them with a tilt of my head. Soon, blood trickled slowly down my thigh, soaking my skirt and dripping onto the brick floor. The panicked screams of maidservants erupted around me. "Something's wrong, Her Highness is bleeding. Quick, summon the Imperial physician. Go fetch the Imperial physician at once." I lay collapsed on the ground, my vision obscured as if through blood-stained glass. Before losing consciousness, I saw Xinyi's face turn deathly pale as he stumbled desperately toward me. When he saw the pool of blood beneath me, he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of heart's blood. He had waited for this child for far too long. He even told others that his child with a Yao had returned. How could he say such things? In our past life, the cold medicine he gave me ruined my health, causing the child to die in my womb. He was the one who killed my child. The child can never come back. After my miscarriage, Xinyi fell seriously ill. He forced himself to deal with the affairs of the Duke's residence before his health completely collapsed. My body recovered quickly, and every day I attended to him by his bedside, serving him medicine. He grew to trust me more and more, discussing state affairs with his ministers without avoiding my presence, even asking me which prince I thought should be crowned as the heir. I paused slightly and said, "Then your Majesty should appoint the 5th prince." He drank the medicine I fed him and asked, "Why?" I gently set down the medicine bowl. "His birth mother, Consort Yi, has a docile temperament. If she were to manage the Imperial harem, our lives as concubines wouldn't be too difficult. We shall have you raise the 5th prince and elevate you to the position of Empress." I lowered my eyes. "This concubine has no wish to raise another's child." He placed his hand over mine. "We'll have more children in the future." I shook my head. "Childbirth is too painful. This concubine no longer wishes to bear children." Xinyi's gaze at me seemed momentarily dazed, but soon he drifted into a heavy slumber. When he awoke the next morning, He officially recognized the fifth prince as my adopted son and issued an edict appointing him as crown prince. I was conferred the title of noble consort after my miscarriage, and now my ascension to empress seems imminent. Such extraordinary imperial favor has made the Ningyuan Earl's residence the most illustrious in the capital, outshining all the noble houses in the city. This caused my good-for-nothing younger brother, who had been spoiled by our mother in our previous life, to stir up several new scandals. When I went to visit Shen Yi, I mentioned the Ningyuan Earl's residence to him. The Marquis of Ningyuan caused several deaths in a fit of jealousy over a courtesan. So I ordered the Ministry of Justice to execute him. Shen Yi's expression turned cold. He was Ayao's younger brother, the only son of the Marquis of Ningyuan's household. I sneered. Why keep such a beast who tarnished my aunt's reputation? Shen Yi closed his eyes. You are too cruel, indeed. Still incomparable to Ayao, your majesty is right. This concubine is indeed cruel. I smiled as I asked him, did your majesty hear the woman's screams last night? He stared at me without speaking. So I answered my own question. When your majesty ordered the empress's execution, she was already mad beyond reason. This concubine didn't want her to die in such confusion, so I changed the poison meant for her. She suffered for 2 full hours until her internal organs rotted away before death. Your majesty, do you think she was conscious during such agony before dying? Shen Yi's gaze grew increasingly unfamiliar as he looked at me. She's already suffered enough humiliation. Why must you torment her like this? I let out a cold laugh. Because I hate her. Not only that, I hate you too. Just a fake pregnancy was enough to make you this ill. It seems you've truly fallen for me. Your majesty, you must keep your emotions calm, or you might die from a surge of blood to your head. He came to his senses, clutching his chest as he looked at me, his once tender eyes now brimming with blood. You poisoned me, you venomous woman. This poison was prepared for your majesty before I even entered the palace. I lowered my eyes, wiping my hands as a faint smile curled my lips. If not for the poison, why would your majesty have been so enraged that you fell gravely ill? Blood gushed continuously from his mouth and nose, his lips parted, but no sound emerged. I smiled. All the palace attendants around have been dismissed by me. Your majesty should save your strength. He couldn't speak, only listen to what I said. I remember, your majesty's greatest wish was to be buried together with Consort Ru after death, and to be her husband in the next life. But yesterday, I already dug up her remains along with her child's, and scattered their ashes in the lake. You two will never meet again in the next life. But I shall bury you and the empress together, so you may never part for all eternity. Shen Yi stared at me with dying eyes, black blood gushing from his mouth, with his last ounce of strength. He uttered one final sentence. I was wrong. You're not Ayao. She would never be this cruel. Tears of laughter streamed down my face. But I am her, Lord Yi. Shen Yi's dilated pupils abruptly contracted. In my past life, during my first night serving him, I waited for him endlessly. Through layers of sheer curtains, I softly asked the indistinct figure beyond, excuse me, sir, will His Majesty be coming tonight? The man remained silent, so I asked again, how should I address you, sir? He replied, Yi, eunuch Yi, may I ask? I looked up and saw Shen Yi, dressed in bright yellow, smiling at me. Only the two of us knew about this matter. Before succumbing to the poison, Shen Yi finally recognized me. When the new emperor ascended the throne, everyone assumed I would become the Empress Dowager. The palace announced that I had suddenly died of a severe illness. The new emperor's birth mother, Consort Yi, was honored as the Empress Dowager. Before leaving the palace, I met her one last time. I smiled and asked her, all the women in this palace hate me, why don't you? She shook her head and said, perhaps it's because you look so much like Mu Yao that I can't bring myself to hate you. I curved my lips into a smile at her. I haven't yet thanked you on behalf of my aunt, for taking care of many of the people around her after her death. Enemies, all of mine are long dead. I smiled at her. Mother didn't want me to spend my whole life confined in the deep palace, so I had to leave. I left the capital with Xiaohong. I told her, now that I have a home, she has one too. In the tranquil mountain village, wisps of cooking smoke drifted with the wind. Father sat in the courtyard doing accounts with his abacus. Mother brought the dishes to the table and sighed to father. I wonder if Maya has suffered any hardships out there. When she looked up again, her movements froze. I stood at the courtyard gate, my eyes brimming with tears. Father, mother, I'm home. The withered tree in the courtyard sprouted fresh green buds, and the wind scattered fallen petals across the steps. Father and mother asked nothing. They simply said to me, just come back safe, that's enough.